Hey everyone, it's Corey from ID Parts, and as the temperature is dropping, you may be wondering how you can get your TDI warmer faster. One of the best options on the market is a product called the Frostheater. It's a coolant heater that comes with custom molded hoses. That way it's a pretty plug and play installation for your TDI. We've got all the different models for all the different TDIs, but today I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to put one on a Mk4 Jetta.
We've got our Mk4 Frostheater right here. And what I'll show you is the hose that this is going to replace is the hose that goes between the side of the cylinder head and the oil cooler, this one right here. So it attaches to the bottom of the oil cooler, then it comes up and it attaches just underneath the three-way flange. You want to open up your coolant bottle before you get started, and then take out the battery and the battery tray to buy yourself some room. Get a bucket and align it underneath the oil cooler to catch coolant as it drains out of the engine. Now you can disconnect the bottom of the two oil cooler hoses. There's a spring clamp on there. Take the spring clamp off with some cable pliers. Then take a flathead screwdriver and gently work the hose off the bottom of the oil cooler. Be sure to try and catch as much coolant as possible in the bucket if you want to use it later. Once all the coolant is drained out, go ahead and disconnect the oil cooler hose from the bottom of the cooling flange on the cylinder head. Again, I'm using a flathead screwdriver here to push the hose off the fitting. You never want to pull coolant hoses because that'll just make them tighter. The next thing we need to do is cut the oil cooler hose that we just removed off of the oil cooler hose that's still connected. It's a two-piece hose, and we need to get one half of it removed. You can see there's a little bridge that connects the two, and just take a box cutter and try your best to slice between the two halves. Do not nick the inside oil cooler hose, the one that's still connected, because that'll just cause a coolant leak and you'll need to replace that hose too. That hose is staying connected. Once you've cut it, just pull it out and out of the way. You don't need that hose anymore. Now you can take the Frostheater and drop it into the engine bay. It's going to sit just in front of the power steering hose, the metal line, and behind the cooling fans. There's just enough room for it there. You want to work it in so that the bottom coolant hose basically ends up where the oil cooler is, and the top hose is gently sitting on top of the wiring loom that's on top of the starter. Now that I've got the Frostheater in place, I can connect the top hose, one that goes to the coolant flange that's on the side of the cylinder head. I'm using cable pliers, hose clamp cable pliers here. Again, they're a huge help on any engine that's got these spring type clamps. So squeeze the clamp and get it out of the way, and then push that hose on to the bottom of the flange, and then you can slide the clamp back up into place and release it. I recommend you put the clamps back in place while you're putting the hoses on, that way you don't forget and potentially drive off with the hose not clamped in place. Do the same thing for the bottom hose that connects to the bottom connection on the oil cooler. Here's the Frostheater with both coolant hoses connected. You can see where it sits and how the connections go up to the cylinder head and then down to the Frostheater and then out to the bottom of the oil cooler. Place the battery tray back in the car. Don't screw it down. We're looking to set the alignment so that we can cut a notch for the bracket for the Frostheater. Use a Sharpie to mark out where the bracket sits. Then take a cutting tool and cut out the lip between the areas that you marked off. Place the battery tray back on the car to be sure your alignment for the bracket is correct. Next, we'll need to drill a hole for the screw. You want to be really careful not to go too far past the battery box because you don't want to accidentally nick the wiring loom that's below the battery box. And with the bracket in place, you can see that the Frostheater sits very nicely between the power steering line and the cooling fans. Now is a great time to start routing the power cord. I recommend you route it in front of the left side skirt and through the small little bumper grill. you'll notice that your coolant is going to be quite low because of all the coolant you've lost. When refilling coolant, you always want to use distilled water because it's free of any contaminants. And on this car, we're going to be using G13 spec coolant. There'll be some air in the cooling system. Squeezing this top radiator hose can help get those bubbles out of the system. You want to keep adding coolant until the coolant level remains at the midway point. Go for a short test drive around the block and then come back and check your coolant level. You'll probably need to add more. Lastly, don't forget your Frostheater sticker. Very important.
You'll want to keep an eye on the coolant level for the next week or so. There may be a bubble that's floating around. Try to go up and down some hills, or even better, is get a coolant pressure adapter, pressurize the cooling system. That way you can be sure you get all the air out of the system.
That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If it was helpful to you, please give me a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to the channel to be notified as I make new videos. Take care, everyone.